All right. Hi, everyone. Welcome to today's event. I'm Jason Gumpert from MS Dynamics World. Really pleased to welcome you to this special session where we are going to be sharing some pretty interesting performance data and metrics and findings taken from our experiences in running lots and lots of webcasts and events in the last couple of years. I hope you're ready for it. I think you'll find some really great takeaways. As we get started, just a couple of notes here. We do welcome your questions and insights. Please do use the questions block in the webcast interface to enter those at any time. We'll be keeping an eye on that, myself, Adam, and Rick. We also are recording today's event, so if you miss any part of it, we will be making that available after the session ends. So with that, I think we are ready to begin. I'm going to hand things over to my colleague, Adam Berzin, to take it from here.
All right. Thanks, Jason. I appreciate it. Welcome, everybody. As Jason mentioned, this is quite a special session. We're going to be talking about webcast metrics and really how they can help all Microsoft business applications marketers. I'm here with my friend and partner of MSDW, Rick McCutcheon, who's a Microsoft MVP and founder of Partner Talks. Rick, thanks for
Hi,
joining.
thank you, Adam. I want to thank you for putting this together. When you showed me this a few weeks back, I was really excited because of our conversations earlier in the year about how this is growing. And I also want to welcome our audience that usually tunes into our Secrets of Selling Dynamics, which we've got scheduled all for next year again. So this should be a session, I think, for the marketers, but I think the sellers need to see this data too. So I'm happy
Yeah.
to be here.
Yeah, no, I agree. And part of what we did before we get into it, we analyzed 2 years worth, excuse me, of our webcast data, which essentially covered about 290 ISV and partner sponsored sessions, analyzing data from about 20,000 registrants. So there's a lot of info. But here's what we're going to cover today. So just going to give people a quick background about MSDW in case they're not too familiar with all that we do. We're going to go through the formula for successful webcasts at MSDW. We're going to get into the good stuff and talk about lots of trends and statistics that we're able to find through our webcast analysis. And then we're going to discuss some key takeaways. So brief background about MSDW. We launched in January of 2008, so we've been around for almost 17 years. We have over 100,000 registered site members. We are the largest news and information resource, and I would say the leading news and information resource in the business application space. And then we also provide very targeted digital demand gen programs to ISVs and partners all around the world. So we have, I would say that obviously the when you run webcasts, the content is obviously a viable part of that, but the process for actually running the webcasts, I would argue is just as important. We have a process that we use for running webcasts that we've really refined over the years, and we've been running sessions for, I'd say, about probably 12 or so years now. And what we found is there are essentially three key components for running successful webcasts. So the first is having strong editorial collaboration. So MSDW being a professional editorial news site and organization, collaborating with the ISV or partner on sort of the best topics to present. Then there's sort of the logistics and platform hosting behind the scenes, which we like to take care of. And then I would say the most important thing is the platform that you use to promote the webcast. In the case when companies do webcasts with MSDW, we are the platform, so we are able to hyper target very specific groups of our site members who we therefore promote ISV and partner webcasts to, so that ensures that it reaches the right audience. So there's really sort of that editorial aspect. Then there's making sure that the logistics are efficiently handled on the back end. And then there's also the platform that you use to promote the webcast. And Rick, you've done a ton of sessions with us too, and I'm sure you can kind of attest to the
Exactly.
process being super important.
Yeah. So, we've done about 100 sessions in the last 4 years. And what I think is really important and what I like working with MSDW is, we can target not only whether it's an end user session, a partner session, or
Mm-hmm.
what we call a hybrid where the audience is both. We can also target, whether we're going after a Business Central audience, F&O, a CRM, whatever audience we're going after, not only by product vertical, industry vertical, but by geography. So if someone's looking to, European, I want to break into the US, Canada, we can do that, or vice versa, right? We can say, you're US based or trying to work more in Europe, we can target that too. So I
Mm-hmm.
think your data is very good for segmentation, which, helps us really find an audience that, can't normally find.
Yeah. I agree 100%. So, the audience, the platform that you run it on, critical parts to a successful webcast. So, all right, we have all this data that we kind of went through, and there are reasons why we wanted to analyze it. First off, it's good for MSDW internally to kind of figure out what's going on with all the webcasts that we run. And as I mentioned, we took this data from about 290 webcasts that we've run over the past 2 years that had over 20,000 registrants. So there were a lot of data points. But we wanted to just really see how our webcasts were performing, the different types of sessions that were doing well, not just from formats which are either live or simulive. And for those of you who don't know what simulive is, simulive are essentially pre-recorded webcasts that are then broadcast as quote unquote live webcasts. So we do the majority of our sessions as simulive. We do a small number of sessions as live events, but we really wanted to just kind of see the comparison between the two, and if there were any similarities or differences from a statistics standpoint. We also wanted to learn about the different session themes and which resonates the best. And by themes, I mean the types of webcasts. Are they product demos? Are they panels? Are they case study sessions? So we wanted to really just kind of get a better understanding as to which types of those sessions are working the best, so then we can let you, the marketers, know, hey, you might want to try running sessions that focus more on thought leadership if you haven't before, or you might want to do more partner focused sessions. So we just wanted to get a better understanding of that. And we also, I'll get into this in a little bit too, but live events are interesting. And as I mentioned, we probably run about, I'd say maybe 10% or probably 7 to 10% of our sessions are run as live webcasts. But there's a lot of strategy that needs to go into a live webcast to make sure that it's actually well attended. And we'll kind of get into that as well. All right, so we're going to get into the good stuff now. Rick, are you ready?
I'm
Are
ready.
you ready to get into it? Okay. All right. So, as I mentioned before, we do about 150 webcasts a year. And these webcasts, these are ISV and partner sponsored webcasts that are run with MSDW. The really cool thing is we've seen a ton of growth, not only in registrant numbers over the past 2 years, but also attendee numbers as well. And I think, getting back to sort of why we also wanted to analyze these statistics, I wanted to kind of see if the webcast fatigue was really a myth. I know it exists on other platforms, but we wanted to really kind of challenge that perception and make sure that, or see if it didn't exist at MSDW. And we've actually found that it does not even remotely exist on our platform, which is really cool. But from sort of a top level statistics perspective, we had a 24% increase in total registrants year over year. The data point that I like and I focus on are the registrants per session. And we saw a 22% increase in those and a 19% increase in total attendees. And Rick, I thought these statistics were pretty cool because, and you've seen this too. There are other sites out there in our industry and in other industries that are not getting these types of numbers, and they're not seeing the growth. And that to me is super interesting.
And I think we're getting, we had a good spike early on doing our sessions, during the pandemic, right?
Hmm.
We had nowhere else to go. And then we dropped off after because everybody was, I think there was a fatigue, and we're saying, "All right, we're all going to go to shows and events and that sort of thing." And we're starting to swing back now. And I'm even seeing that with the user group communities that I help organize, right? We're getting more people coming back. We had a, spiked, kind of went down, and we're getting now more people coming back for virtual meetings. So
Hmm. Hmm.
I think, the whole idea of, we're busy, we've got things to do, and we've got lots of projects to work on. So from a customer's perspective, I think this is a lot easier, and still people are having difficulties getting, travel
Hmm.
budgets. So I think they're saying, okay, let's get our education online. And we're seeing more customers and partners doing their due diligence online. That's growing every
Hmm.
year, right? So if I'm looking for AP automation, if I'm looking for, something like NMB with supply chain, I'm going to look online, and do that, maybe go to a show and meet them. But I think
Hmm.
online is going to continue to spike like this.
Hmm. Yeah, and I agree with that. I think a huge reason why we've seen the growth that we have seen is because we're in such a niche market, and our ability to, as I mentioned before, hyper target specific audiences that the ISV or partner sponsor wants to reach ensures that that particular content is hitting the right people that actually care about that particular topic or topics. And I think because of that, it entices more of those people to sign up because of relevance. And I think that was a huge thing that that made it even more important after COVID, was making sure that the content is as relevant and as targeted as possible to the people that you want to reach. And then you pair that with a platform that can actually do the targeting for you. Um, that really is, like, I think, a true recipe for successful webcast growth. So I thought that was super interesting. Um, Another thing that we found that was really awesome was the percentage increase in on-demand leads. And the cool thing about this is we're able to track the on-demand data that comes in from our webcasts because about 7 or 8 years ago we built our own video hosting platform, which is now embedded directly into MSDW, and that has actually built-in sales lead capture. So we can actually track and know exactly the people that consume our webcasts once they go on demand. And from the previous year up until now, we've seen a 74% increase in on-demand webcast consumption, which is huge. And that's not just an indication, I think, of people wanting to consume on-demand videos, but it also shows you that people, not only do people like to consume those recorded videos, but from a sponsor perspective, that's more leads that these companies get consistently after the webcast ends. So, Rick, I thought that this was a huge data point.
Yeah,
I
and I
didn't
think
expect it to be this high.
yeah, and I think a lot of the spike too is, especially decision makers will sign up for a lot of content on the
Mm,
web and knowing we're never going to get there, right? So hopefully that they'll get the proper follow up, and MSDW does a great job of that. Okay, here was the session, you missed it, now you can take it. As
mm-hmm,
well, I think we do a better job of social coverage, right? And our
mm,
partners who are
yeah,
sponsoring these events are doing better job of social coverage. So I think
mm-hmm,
it's driving people to the event and to the replays on the event. So again, these types of numbers are just going to keep going up.
yeah. I agree completely. So now, as actually, let me see. Did I skip? No. So as I mentioned at the beginning of this, we run two types of webcasts. So there are live sessions. Everybody knows what a live session is. And then once again, there are simulive sessions. And we run the vast majority of our sessions as simulive, which essentially are pre-recorded webcasts that we do with the ISV or the partner about a week or so before it airs. And then we play it 3 times in a single day in different to reach people in different time zones. And we started doing this about, I think, like maybe 6 or 7 years ago. And the reason why is we wanted to give people more flexibility in terms of when they can view, quote unquote live webcasts. So, this was interesting. We saw a huge increase in the number of registrations for live events this year compared to last year. But once again, it's because we actually ran more live events. And I think the majority of those live events were, Rick, the ones that you do, the Secrets to Selling Dynamics, which are essentially partner education sessions. So that really accounted for the increase in the number of live sessions. But we saw consistent registration increase across the board. Once again, with the exception of the live sessions, just because we ran so many more of them.
And if I can just comment on this,
Yeah.
the simulive. So when I'm working with a client and they're asking me what we should do, I always try to point them to a simulive event, just because you're going to run it in 3 time zones,
Hmm.
right? And it's going to be marketed in their time zone. And if you're going to have a session that has a lot of Q&A, right, a lot of interaction, like we do the Secrets to Selling Dynamics,
Hmm.
or the monthly portal call they do, right, where they're interacting on how to build portals. I think there's
Yeah.
items like that, sessions like that, that fit that live event better. But if
Hmm.
we're doing it, it's going to be straight message and marketing with some Q&A. I think the simulive is still the way to go.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. So it's more about being strategic in terms of which format you choose to use. But yeah, I think that's interesting, Rick. And yeah, and just to clarify too, so the account for the increase in the number of live sessions were for the Secrets to Selling Dynamic sessions, and then we also did lots of what we call community calls, which are sessions that focus on one Dynamics platform, or one business application or one solution within sort of the business application space, and those are typically run live as well. Now, whoops, get back. So this data I actually find sort of to be the most important, or one of the most important data points. Um, when you separate the number of sessions that you essentially do, and you talk about whether it's live or simulive, and you talk about the average registrations per session per format, I think this breaks it down nicely. But once again, we actually saw live events grow over 51%, which was really interesting. And I actually didn't think it was going to be that high. I expected growth on the simulive side, on the average registrants per session, and that was a little over 19%, so not as high as the live events. And that's interesting too, because then you kind of get into the situation where, all right, is it because did live events grow faster because they're live events from an average registrant per session? Or is it just because of the nature of the content that happened to be run as a live event? So I don't know, Rick. I mean, that's kind of there's different variables that are sort of hard to accurately calculate.
So we're seeing with the Secrets to Selling Dynamics, where we're probably getting 25 to 30% repeat,
Yeah.
because we've got some very good guests coming on to talk about this, and once people see it,
Hmm.
they come back, right? And they get added
Yeah.
to our list and we promote to them. So I think if you're doing something, and, I'm talking to some partners now about starting to do their own community calls as
Mm.
live events, right?
Hmm.
Because that's something where we can start to grow those on an ongoing basis. So I think that's partly why we're doing the live events.
Yeah. No, I would agree with that. I would agree. Um, and then this is also, moving to attendees by session format also. Um, this was interesting too. Now, at the next slide, you'll see sort of a different view of this. But we once again we saw the number of attendees increase across the board. Live attendees increased over 33%. There was a 12.5% increase for simulive webcasts. So the simulive is steady. There was just a sharper increase for the live sessions.
We're doing a lot less live sessions though, right? Like
We're
we're
do,
just
we're
getting into
doing
live. Yeah.
yeah, we're doing a lot less live sessions. But if I want to show you this next slide too, if you take a look at the attendance rate, and this is really what I think sort of matters the most when you're talking about attendee statistics. Live webcasts actually had a fairly large decrease in attendance rate, whereas simulive webcasts had almost a 12.5% increase in attendance rate from the previous year. So, what this kind of tells me is people will register for live events, but a lot of the times, the majority of those people will wait until it goes on demand to view it. Whereas because simulive is offered in three different times, um, people are more likely to actually attend a simulive session. That's sort of what I took from that. Rick, what do you think?
Yeah, because we're running the Secrets to Selling Dynamics on the third Friday of the month at 12 noon Eastern,
Yeah,
right? So that
yeah,
that's past closing time for our European folks. So I
hmm,
think they subscribe and then they pick it up on demand. So
yeah,
if that Friday at lunch doesn't work for you, then you're gonna listen to the recording. And I
hmm,
think as well, we get a lot of people listening to the live events and say, "Man, that was really good information. I'm going to get my colleagues to listen to it more so on the recording side of
yep,
things."
yep. No, I agree. That makes sense. So one of the other things we wanted to do also is because we run sessions, as Rick just said, we run secrets to selling sessions on Fridays. We didn't run any sessions in the previous year that we analyzed on Monday, but we ran a couple of sessions on Monday this year, and actually the numbers were pretty good. But if you take a look. Registrations for Tuesdays grew by about a little over 24%. Wednesday had the highest growth, which was over 43%, which I found very interesting. Thursday was pretty flat. We run a ton of sessions on Thursdays. Thursdays are fairly consistent across the board for both registrations and attendees. And then Fridays, the average registrations per session decreased about 16%. So I thought that was interesting. And when we schedule a webcast for ISVs and partners, um, sometimes companies will ask us if they could do it on a Tuesday or a Wednesday or a Thursday or Friday. Very rarely Monday. And uh, you know, but it really depends on our availability as well. So it just could so happen that sessions are run on Fridays because there's no other day during the week that is available. So it really depends. But Fridays are, even though we saw a decrease. I mean, Rick, I don't know what you think about this, but Fridays are typically okay to run webcasts. I mean, one thing that I would like to experiment with in 2025 is actually running some simulive webcasts on Fridays, doing a little bit more of those just to see what those numbers are. That could be interesting.
And I'm seeing some partners telling me that Monday and Fridays are working better now for their own events. So maybe there's a
Mm,
saturation point midweek where there a
yeah.
lot of events to choose from, or we just get busy. And
Hmm.
maybe people are taking like Friday is more downtime for education. And I know I'm working with one group who's they're kind of focused. Friday is a learning day. You've got to go learn something on Friday.
Mm,
So
yeah.
I think there's a bit of that going out there as
Yeah.
well.
Yeah, it's funny. I always felt that Friday sessions would work better almost because I feel like people are a little bit more relaxed because the weekend is coming up. So they might just want to kind of lounge back and watch a session. Um, but yeah, I don't know. We'll see in 2025. This is also interesting too. And as I mentioned before, whenever we talk about attendees, like total attendee numbers, I always like to look at what the attendance rate is. Um, and really, I mean, there wasn't a whole heck of a lot of change between the days. Once again, with the exception of Mondays, just because we didn't run any sessions last year on Mondays, and we ran some this year. But yeah, I mean, really, if you take a look at the numbers, I think the highest increase was on Tuesdays from an attendance rate perspective. But every day of the week gets pretty good attendance. I mean, even if Friday tends to be sort of on, tends to be on the lower side, that doesn't necessarily mean that it's bad. But Rick, as you said too, I mean, there are it could be that Tuesdays through Thursdays have become a little bit more saturated for sessions. So if people start running more sessions on Mondays and even more sessions on Fridays, maybe they'll start to see that attendance rate go up.
Yeah, and I think on Monday a lot of times it sounds like a good idea. We sign up for something on a Monday, and then we get into work, and a lot of things start to happen, so it gets
Yeah,
pushed off.
yeah. No, for sure. I agree. This was another interesting data point that we looked at too. What time of day are people actually registering for their sessions? Um, and this probably to me, and Rick, I don't know if you felt this way also. This was one of the most surprising statistics. Now, we have a worldwide audience at MSDW. About 42% are based in North America. I think 28% are in EMEA, 26% are in Asia Pacific, and about 2% are in South America. But a lot of our sessions are promoted to a worldwide audience, and I actually thought that we would get the vast majority of people to sign up for the 12 p.m. the noon Eastern time slot. But we see almost double the number of people that are signing up for 9 a.m. Eastern sessions. And when I take a look at those registration reports, there is a very healthy combination of North American based registrants and international based registrants. So I thought that was pretty interesting. That surprised me quite a bit. Rick, what do you think?
No, I think this is very telling data that those morning sessions are the most important because, and I think again we get into our day and um, we get too busy. So we're saying early in the morning I can stop, do something, get it done. So I pick that time.
Yeah. Yeah, it's once again that this statistic was definitely one of the most surprising to me. And then if you look at the attendance during the time of day as well, this was also pretty interesting. Although I did expect noon to actually be at or above the 50% mark, in which it is. Um, I was very surprised with the 3 p.m. slots. I wasn't too surprised with the 9 a.m. slots because I had originally thought that people would register for the 9 a.m. and then view it on demand, but we still actually achieved about a 48% attendance rate in 2024 for 9 a.m. sessions. But the 3 p.m. being over 50%, considering on Eastern time that's getting close to the end of the day, that surprised me a lot. All right, so now before we get into this in terms of the types of sessions that are working the best, so I get this question asked to me all the time, pretty much every time I speak with an ISV or a partner about webcasts. What are your average webcast numbers? What numbers can I expect to see for my session? Um, and I always say it really depends on the type of session that you do, not from a live or a simulive perspective, but what theme. And I'll give you an example of a few here that we see that ISVs and partners typically run with us and sort of the average results that we see. So there are really five types of sessions that companies will run. And we analyzed each one of these. And the first are product deep dives. So, these are typically in-depth product demos. They're discussions around products, specifically the ISV's own product, talking about sort of the innovation behind the product. It's really all about the product. And for these, what we found was the average number of registrants that we get, typically around the 55 range. But I just want to note something too. Just because certain sessions, as you'll see, might get lower numbers than others, that doesn't mean that it's bad to do a product deep dive, as an example, because the quality of the people that go to these sessions are very high, because once again, they are specifically targeted based on their interests. So it's really, it's a quality over quantity thing. I know quantity is important. Everybody likes to see quantity, but I always stress quality. But this was interesting. So for product deep dives, once again, we see about 55 on average for targeted registrants. The average attendance rate is almost at the 50% range. And Rick, you and I had looked at this stuff the other day, and I think we found that the industry average for attendance rate across all sessions is something like 27%. It's pretty low.
Yes.
We typically achieve almost double that, which is really cool.
Yeah.
The highest number that we saw for product deep dive session this year was 148, which was interesting.
Yeah.
The next
So if we
type
can
of session.
go back to that last one, Adam.
Sure.
So just on the Click Learn product, it's a digital
Mhm.
adoption tool for CRM and F&O and BC. What's really important here is that this is a CRM session on implementation and training, right? So you know that the people who are attending this have a CRM project, right? And they're actually doing something around CRM. So it's very, very targeted. And they have to be in sort of that world of, hey, we're doing user implementation and training right now. So
Mhm.
it's very targeted. This is where they are in the buy cycle. If someone's
Yeah.
just thinking about a project, they're not going to attend this. So we know
Mhm.
that this is somebody who has an active project or a partner who's delivering active projects, which,
Yeah.
to get 54 registrants in that world is very, very good.
Yeah, exactly. Because you're talking about, 54 registrants that are essentially in the later stages of the purchase cycle. So the quality of those registrants is incredibly high. Um, Another type of session that we find that ISVs and partners will run are essentially user education sessions. We find that the educational sessions on the site, they do really well. I mean, they're some of the most, I'd say, sessions that achieve the highest average number of registrants. In this case, almost 124 per session, with the average attendance rate of just a little bit over 49%. The cool thing is we actually saw one of these user education sessions this year generate 428 registrants of users who were interested in the particular topic that the session covered. So I thought that was really interesting. Out of all the different types of sessions, and you'll see a few more as we kind of go through more of these slides. It's really interesting to me to kind of see how people react to different session themes. And some people like to be educated. Some people want to see demos. Some people want to see panel discussions. Some people want to see in-depth case studies. It's such an individual, personal preference from a content consumption perspective. And then it's also a timing perspective too. Where is that person in the buying cycle? So I think it's really interesting that we see a lot more companies wanting to be educated.
So it's interesting on this fabric topic because
Yeah.
both the session you talked about where we got over 400, it was a
Mhm.
fabric
Yeah.
session as
Yes,
well.
it
So I
was.
think
Yeah.
fabric came onto the scene. We all wanted to be educated because
Hmm. Hmm.
I was at the Doug conference and there was a fabric session in a room that only held 50 people. There was 150 people trying to get in there. So I
Yeah.
think as a partner, whether you're an ISV or an SI, you can say, okay, Fabric just came out, it's hot, it hasn't even been out to the shows yet, right? Let's do a session, target it right now before, why the press is hot on it. And if you're an
Hmm.
ISV, how are you integrating with Fabric? Talk
Hmm.
about it at a session. And we saw the same blip with AI, right? When AI first came out, everybody
Yep.
was jumping on. That's starting to cool down now. So
Yeah.
I think getting the right topic, getting it out fast, and getting it to the targeted audience, we definitely saw that with these Fabric sessions.
Yeah. Timing is huge for topics. I absolutely agree. Um, so Rick, this is your domain. So these are the
Mhm.
partner education sessions. So Rick does a lot of these for MSDW. We have lots of ISVs that will run sessions that are just geared towards partners. They do pretty well. We found that it's almost 110 average targeted registrants or targeted partners that attend these, which is really cool. Um, the attendance rate is lower than some of the other session formats, but the biggest reason is because we run a lot of these live. So that kind of skewed the results a little bit. Um, the highest number that we saw for a partner education session this year was 173 partners, which was really nice. Rick, what do you think about these? I know this is your domain and you do a ton of these partner sessions. I think they're gaining a lot more interest.
Yeah, I think this is good because there's not a lot of places to go for partners to get education um, outside of Microsoft, and
Mm,
the Microsoft education is based on their products. So we did these, and we also did a series of specifically how to sell products, like we did how to sell AP automation, how to sell supply chain, how to sell digital adoption. So there was a spin-off of a lot of these, which we did simulive, right?
hmm.
So
Hmm.
I think, working with a theme, and, if I'm a partner and I can build out a theme around my products or around my offering, I think you can, do a combination of live and simulive. And I think
Yeah.
there's right now we got someone doing a Fabric session. We've got someone doing Power Pages portal sessions. So I think
Hmm.
grabbing hold of one of those topic areas and kind of building out your strategy around that is a great way to go.
Mm, yeah, that's a great point. So then we also run lots of panel discussions, which a lot of the times Rick will moderate. Um, Rick, I feel like we've run probably 100 of these over the past 3 or 4 years, and yeah, these have always been popular at MSDW. Um, it's branding, it's lead generation, but more. I'd say it's more thought leadership too, because when you run a panel, we always encourage that if you're an ISV, you bring on a partner, or you bring on a user, or you bring on somebody from Microsoft or another MVP. So it kind of puts you on sort of a level playing field with all these other experts, and it's really good from a positioning standpoint. And these have been pretty consistent. When I did statistics, like when I looked at our statistics a couple of years ago when we started, after a year of doing panels, the average number of registrants were slightly lower, but we've seen sort of a moderate increase. The attendance rate is pretty good, over 48%. And then the highest panel session that we saw this year was 151 targeted registrants. So, panels, I'm a huge fan of them. Rick, I know you've done a ton of them. What do you think is the primary benefit of a panel, kind of in addition to sort of what I said about the thought leadership element?
So it's kind of interesting with a panel. I'm not sure if a panel creates a lead for you. That's, an end user wanting to buy something now. I think this is more of a credibility builder.
Yeah.
And it really, you can use a panel strategically. And that's what I do when I'm working with our customers, is say, okay, who do you want to be on your panel, right? Because you're going to take your company, and Eventica is a great example. Eventica does
Hmm.
great work in F&O commerce, right? So they bring on their partners that they work with to talk about, you know, how to deliver this. They bring on Microsoft on a regular basis about how to deliver this, and they'll bring on a customer about projects they've delivered. So it's almost like, Aventica's building their brand, but they're also sort of building their swagger, right?
Hmm.
That, hey, look at these top people who work with Aventica. And I think any ISV that's working with partners, this is a
Mm.
great way to say, okay, here are the great partners we work with today. The rest of the partners out there, you really need to be working with us. So, I hope we see this expanded more for 2025, because it doesn't generate that lead that's going to close in 30, 60, 90 days, but it
Yeah.
does position you strategically in a category and let you build on that.
Hmm. And that's all part of the whole story that an ISV needs to tell, or a partner needs to tell. And I also think, Rick, to your point too, that's why if you want to get leads from webcasts that are higher up in the purchase stage or further along in the buying cycle, that's where you do the case study sessions, the product deep dives. So doing a combination of those types of sessions will naturally lead to getting leads of people who are in the different stages of the buying cycle. But to your point, I mean, the credibility is so huge with these panels, and I think that's the main benefit that companies have seen with them. Um, and then the fifth type of session that we see companies do are case study sessions. So there's a couple of different case study sessions that we've seen companies do. We've seen ISVs do user case study sessions, and then we've seen ISVs do partner case study sessions. So once again, we see pretty strong numbers for these. I mean, I would classify these sort of along the same level as product deep dives, where they tend to attract people in the later stages of the purchase cycle. They're very targeted with who they attract as well, in terms of the types of people that would be applicable to the solution that's being discussed in the case study, as well as the topic itself. So these are pretty. This is a pretty strong format. We don't see as many case study sessions being run as I'd like to. I think ISV should really start doing a lot more of them, because they do hold a ton of value here.
And the user case study is always difficult, because I need
Yeah.
to find a user that says yes. And then there's a lot of prep that goes into a session like this, and we
Hmm.
build decks and we have rehearsals. So to get an end user customer to do that for you, you've got to have a really good relationship. But we're
Yeah.
doing a couple now where we're just, I'm going to a partner. I've got one coming up in January with Resco, the advanced
Hmm.
mobility company. We're going to take existing case studies that they've got sign off, and they've done, oil and gas, government, whatever inspections. And we'll just present 3 case studies of here's how we work. And we did this with another e-commerce provider earlier this year. And I thought it really went well, because we
Hmm.
tailored the message, we brought it together, and we got very good attendance from it, because it was specific to a certain area, and people love case studies.
Yeah. No, they really do, and I think the trick is to make it as detailed as possible. Customer quotes, partner quotes are good, but you really want to lay out the exact issue or issues that the company was going they were dealing with, and then really how you specifically resolve those step by step by step. So, I always recommend, when companies want to do a case study session, just make it as detailed and as specific and in the weeds as possible, so people can really kind of really feel your pain, what you were going through. And those are the types of sessions that I've seen really work the best from a case study perspective. All right, so we've got a few key takeaways here. So I guess the biggest thing that I want to stress here is we have seen significant growth in attendance and registrations, year over year over year. And I really think that it's a testament to the fact that we occupy a niche market in the business application space. But I think there's two big things at play here. I think the first is that ISVs and partners are doing a much better job of making the content even more targeted to their ideal prospects. And then when you match that with MSDW's webcast process, the MSDW platform and its targeting capabilities, that really increases the probability that the webcast is going to have high registrations and be well attended. So I think that that's super important. We've also seen, as we saw too, significant increase in on-demand leads, which means that people like to view recorded videos, and that it probably sounds obvious, but that's a big indicator, and not just from a webcast statistic, but also that should tell you as an ISV and a partner that you should create on-demand videos regardless of whether or not you're doing webcasts. You need to have that type of content because it's consumed. Um, Another thing that we saw too were sort of the interesting statistics around live webcasts and the growth that we've seen in registrations and in attendees. As we mentioned, that is definitely a lot of that is attributed to the fact that we ran almost almost triple the amount of live sessions this year as we did last year. But on a per session basis, we did see that live registrations grew by, I think, 51% or something. So I mean, that's a huge increase. But we also saw that there was a drop in the attendance rate for live sessions. Whereas if you take a look at the simulive sessions, we saw, I think it was almost a 12.5% increase. The timing trends, so we saw that really Thursdays seem to be sort of the prime day for when people want to register and attend sessions. Although, I really would like to see more companies kind of experimenting with Mondays and more sessions on Fridays, but doing simulive sessions on Fridays and simulive sessions on Mondays. As we've seen, the live sessions on Fridays tend to get pretty good registration numbers, but it's tricky with live webcasts. If you're giving somebody one time to view it, that decreases the probability that it'll work for them. So that's why we always tend to see a good increase in attendance for simulive sessions, because we offer multiple times in a single day for people to view them. And then also, as we saw too, going through the session themes, I once again, I want to stress that, I mean, I'm personally happy with the data that was found for all the 5 session themes that we saw. But if you had to pick one, I mean, we really did see how high the numbers are for educational sessions. And I think that's a big indication that ISVs and partners should do more of those. If you're just a company that really just focuses on doing product deep dives and selling your solution, if you want to reach people that might not be there yet, it's really important to do those educational sessions, because then that'll help sort of fill up your pipeline and you can nurture those people along. But the data doesn't lie here, and educational sessions really seem to stand out as being the most popular. Rick, anything to add?
Oh yeah, we could have a whole nother session on the
I
takeaways,
know.
right? So I know we're working on a couple of key programs for 2025 around partner to partner, right?
Yeah.
So how
Yep.
can, we build campaigns,
Hmm.
and I know you have subscriptions you're offering now too for the full year,
Yeah.
which I
Yep.
highly recommend. You've got to kind of say, okay, if I'm an ISV and I'm looking to acquire partners and build, it's not a stop and go process. It's something that you
Mm-hmm.
have to kind of build throughout the year and build with a number of these different types, whether it's, thought leadership, whether it's a partner update, whether it's product deep dive, but based, specifically for partners or
Mm-hmm.
for end users. So I think coming in and making it a full year strategy is the way to go. And I think the value proposition, like we just came off all the shows, and I go to all the shows and I present at all the shows. And they're all good. I enjoy the shows. The networking is fantastic, and networking is really important for our community, right, and who we're involved with. But we got to
Hmm.
remember, 80% of partners and 80, over 80% of partners and customers never go to a show, right? So we've
Yeah.
got to find different ways of getting to them. And I think we came out of the pandemic with heavy show investment, and I think we're going
Hmm.
to start to swing back and see more digital coming back and getting to people, through this method. So I'm
Yeah.
excited about 2025, and I think the marketers and partners that are on this call today are probably excited about it too, because
Yeah.
we're seeing things really picking up out there.
Hmm. Yeah, it's definitely an interesting landscape. It's always evolving, whether it's, well, not so much traditional activities, but in the digital space, it's always evolving. There's new ways to target, there's new strategies for reaching your prospects. I will say though, Rick, to something you brought up too about kind of making sure that it's a continuous thing in your marketing, year round. When it comes to webcasts specifically, a lot of the companies that will do webcasts on MSDW, they do multiple webcasts a year. It could be a webcast every other month. It could be a webcast, one per quarter. But the point is they are reaching their target prospects somewhat consistently through webcasts. And then they're doing other stuff with us as well also. But from a webcast perspective, doing multiple webcasts and doing webcasts in different formats with different themes throughout the year, I've seen a lot of ISVs have a ton of success doing that. And yeah, and Rick, as you mentioned too, you have a P2P program that you're running. We have a new subscription program, demand gen subscription program that includes webcasts, which is a pretty easy way to start getting involved if you want to do more webcasts or if you haven't done webcasts with us yet. But yeah, the key in 2025, really pretty much in every year, but in 2025 specifically, is going to be that continuous engagement with users. And if you're an ISV, with users and partners. All right. Well, I want to thank everybody for attending. If you want to get in touch with either Rick or myself, our emails are right there. Jason, do we have any questions that came in?
Yeah, we had a
Should
few
we wait
questions
for
come in.
questions? Okay.
I took a few that were a little
Which,
more specific, but here's a couple
okay.
that we could probably discuss. So
Sure.
Naomi made a great point that she was surprised that registering for webcasts depends on time of day because the other approach, obviously, and we know this, is that people will register even if they know they can't make it to the live event because they want the
Hmm.
recording, they want the deck,
Hmm.
they want the follow up information. So I
Yeah.
think we kind of see both sides on that one. Wouldn't you agree? That some people
Yeah.
go one way, some people go the other way.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Once again, it's such a personal preference. There might be some people that will register for a 9 a.m. session and they will go and attend. But I think most people know nowadays that if somebody is doing a webcast, it's going to be recorded, and there's a good chance that they'll be emailed the link afterwards. So I still think it shows considerable interest when somebody registers for a webcast. But yeah, no, that's an interesting point.
Yeah, if I could just also throw in my 2 cents, I think the time of
Yeah.
day stuff is some of the hardest to get a handle on in terms of actually
Hmm.
drawing conclusions because I think you take into account the fact that there's a drop down on the registration pages and how that's
Hmm.
presented with the different time choices and like this person has said, some people it's not really the key detail. So yeah, great
Hmm.
point and
Hmm.
one worth continuing to
Yeah,
talk
for
about.
sure.
Uh,
Hmm.
Another one I can bring up if you want.
Yeah. Yep. Keep
So,
them coming.
Jim was asking, do we send one confirmation email? Do we send multiple? Do we call to
Mm.
confirm attendance?
Yeah. All right. So that's a great point, and I did not talk about this, but leading up to the session, the promotional aspects are very, very important. So I would say, and Jason, I'm sure you can agree with this too, the main driving force behind registrants to our webcasts are through the dedicated email blasts that we do for each session. So we typically start about 2 weeks before the air date, and we'll send out 3 dedicated email blasts promoting one specific webcast, and those emails go out to very, very targeted segments of our site member base that the ISV or the partner sponsor has asked us to reach. So kind of directing the full force of the promotion just to that target audience, that increases the probability exponentially that you're going to get not only more people to attend, but more of the right people to attend. And then to Jim's question, sort of post webcast, sending out a confirmation, or actually, well, did Jim, was the question sending out a confirmation before the event starts,
It was a
or
call to confirm
a call
someone's
to confirm?
attendance.
Okay, okay. Well, I mean, I know we, and Jason, correct me if I'm wrong, but I know that we send out attendee confirmation emails, I think once or twice. I think it's once about a week before the event starts, and then I think it's the
I
day
think it's
of,
I think it's typically a
right?
day before and an hour before.
Okay. All
Um,
right. Okay. All right.
but we
So it's a
don't we
couple
don't
that we send out.
we don't
Yeah.
directly call the attendees on the phone, if that's what you were
No,
asking.
no. Yeah, no. I mean, yeah, we don't do that. But I think, I think any outreach to them, but most, preferably email, I would think would be the best approach, if Jim, if that's something you're
Yeah, it's
looking
been
to
it's been
do.
pretty clear when we measure people coming in through social, through direct,
Yeah.
like landing on our site,
Hmm.
uh, or versus responding to emails. It's almost always emails that drive
Yeah.
the
Yep.
vast bulk of the signups still.
Hmm. Yep. I agree with that.
That was, I think, the last question here that we needed to answer. There were a few other, more detailed things, just asking about would we get into percentages of registration versus attendee, which I think we did, and the
Mm,
simulive numbers versus the live numbers. So I think we
yeah.
covered all that.
I
We
can
will
go
be
back to
following
those
up.
if that person would like me to.
I think you answered it as we
Yeah.
went, but if you have any other questions or want to see the data sliced in any different ways,
Yeah.
anything else like that, we're happy to try to do it and get back to you. So don't hesitate to reach out to Adam if you have that kind of question. But that's it for
Sounds
questions.
good.
If I can just add, if you're interested in
Yeah.
the secrets for selling Dynamics or the partner to partner programs we'll be running with MS Dynamics World next year,
Hmm.
please reach out to me on LinkedIn or my email there. Also, we have an event in Chicago, since talk about not just simulive but live, called the Partner Marketing Event. That's going to be before the Dynamics Con conference on the Monday. Last
Yep.
year we had 75 Dynamics marketers together. This year, I think we'll be well over 100 Dynamics marketers together for a
Hmm.
day of looking at data like this and having some great conversations. So again, you can reach out to Adam or myself if you'd like more information on the partner marketing event.
Yep. Yep. We'll also be unveiling our annual survey on how marketers or how users prefer to be marketed to by ISVs and partners, which is always pretty cool. We get some great data out of that every year. So, all right. Well, if Jason, if there's no other questions that have come in, why don't we end there? I want to thank everybody for attending. Um, I hope you have a great holiday season. If I do not connect with you before then, and thanks so much for your time. We really appreciate it.
Thanks, Adam. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Rick.
Okay.
All right, we will conclude things there. Have a good day, everyone.